everything in that site that we can gain from it. So, in our particular world, we are, well, before that, yeah, okay, so as an example, Ken is growing in, I think you mentioned kind of a fertile site, at 7 tons an acre. That's what it is. And so Ken is growing the very best quality fruit from the site he is given. And that's what, ultimately, that's what the grower has to do. In our particular world in Napa, we're looking at some fertile sites, but more often than not in our world, they're a little bit more restrictive than that. And so we have a range anywhere from 2 to 4 tons. We couldn't grow 7 tons if we wanted to in these sites. But the grower and the winery have to agree on the parameters for the program that the wine is growing for. And that's exactly what Ken is doing when he's growing at 7 tons an acre. He's growing for the program for that winery. In our particular situation, we either have a single vineyard or a blend that Steve has in mind. And we're growing, like I said, between 2 and 4 tons an acre on these restrictive soils. You know, Ken has said so much, and Steve has already said enough.
I have a little bit more, actually.
Okay, great. I don't think I can really add much more to what these two have already said.
But I can.
But you can.
So the last thing I wanted to wrap up with was that, you know, one of our big inspirations, of course, and me personally, are these wonderful ridge wines that have come out over the years that David's worked on, and Paul and now Eric as well have been making. There's a wonderful sense of mysterious journey, voyage, when you open up a bottle of Ridge, and it is that same philosophy that I always embark on when I do either a single vineyard, if it's worthy of it, or a blend. I want to craft something that has these wonderful layers, and they're doing this with American oak, and I'm doing it with older French oak because I just don't have the skill for the American oak. You know, some people are great at it, and so we think, going back to even the 2006 Petit Syrah seminar over at Fopiano, where we had Robert Britton and then Sean Thackeray talking about it. We believe that Petit Syrah is potentially just a great wine, and we need to consider how to elaborate the flavors, elaborate the strength, and build in this sort of mysterious part that it's not like a Merlot, it's not like a Cab. You know, while some of these vineyards may have limited textures, in combination, as you go through something up in Spring Mountain and mix it with something over in over in Calistoga, and then pop in something really feminine that we've got growing over in Rutherford that we share with Rockwall, we'll end up with a wine that's crafted and usually virtually 100% Petit Syrah, but has layers to it that we think are just profound. The other thing that we also do, and I think Viña Robles is here, I have one of their blends as well. We'll do a Petit Syrah mix, which you've had it dark and delicious, and we'll pop in some Zinfandel. And I can craft something that has a similar journey in the tannins that Napa Cabernet has for about half the price. And so I try to talk to all these restaurant guys and hit them over the head with that. It's what we call our like father, like son, because Syrah is one of the parents of Petit Syrah. So anyway, I just want to thank everybody here.
Thank you, Steve and Bob. like to move into our last panelist, and then if we have some time after that, we can do any catch-up questions for any of the topics we've had. Ellen is a certified sommelier and the wine director and sommelier at Landis Shores Oceanfront Inn, which she co-owns with her husband and chef Ken Landis. Landis Shores was named one of the top 15 inns for wine connoisseurs in North America. She has traveled many wine regions throughout North America and internationally. Ellen holds an MBA. Her wine education includes UC Davis courses and the Court of Master Sommelier and Certification Program. She serves as a judge at various California wine competitions. Ellen also hosts and participates in numerous blind tastings and various wine events as a speaker and panelist. Please welcome Ellen Landis.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here. Can you all hear me? Great. Petite Syrah. I love this wine, and I have a connection to it. As the smallest of 6 sisters, I was always called petite. In fact, my mother said, tiny but mighty. And I really like that. Doesn't that just capture this grape? Tiny berries, a mighty wine. And it's really a great food pairing wine. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some foods that I enjoy with Petite Syrah, but I'd like to just say a little bit about 2 general rules. The first one is, this is a full-bodied hearty wine, as we all know, and it really is best paired with full-bodied cuisine. But secondly, equally important, whose palate is it anyway, right? It's your palate. And no matter what you do, you're not doing it wrong. Nobody can take that away from you. So it's really important to please your palate, as well as following general rules about cuisine and pairing with wine. Okay, so a couple of wineries around the room I'm going to be mentioning because I've had their wines with these dishes. This certainly isn't an exclusive pairing, so keep that in mind because we have some amazing winemakers and beautiful wines today that we're going to be tasting this afternoon. I'll start with a hearty beef stew. This is a very warm, rich dish, and it really stands up with the density of the fruit in Petite Syrah. Comfort food, comfort wine. It's a beautiful winter dish, and nothing matches it better than Petite Syrah. And the wine that I have really enjoyed with a hearty beef stew is Silkwood's 2007 Petite Syrah. And I'll have to say that last night I also tried the Lot 3 from Silkwood, and the satin and silk, absolutely beautiful. Beautiful pairing with a hearty beef stew. Okay, my next, and maybe most often, I think Petite Syrah is also always connected with bacon or bacon fat. And so I like to say a filet mignon, either wrapped in bacon or topped with a creamy blue cheese, is really a spectacular pairing because you have this big, hearty wine with plenty of tannins, and you've got this good protein, and the protein of the beef and the fat in either the bacon or the creamy blue cheese really tones down tannins nicely. So it really complements one another. And with this dish, I recently had an 08 Biale Royal Punishers Petite Syrah. Fabulous. All right, next we go out to the barbecue with some grilled pork tenderloin and a nice sage, sea salt, black pepper rub. This really screams for a very spicy Petite Syrah, and as we've heard from many of the speakers today, that is a spicy, good variety. So you like any kind of foods that are going to be picking up the pace with a spice component, especially when you're drinking a nice spicy petite. With this dish, it was the 2000 Concannon Heritage Petite Syrah that really shined. And I believe you still have some of the 2000 for sale, is that right?
Yes.
Really nice. And we've heard earlier that the ageability of Petite Syrah is really unbelievable. I think people underestimate this grape because they don't realize how beautifully it can age. It really does a great job. Another thing I liked about this pairing was that the charcoal grilled tenderloin really brought out the kind of a smoky, toasty note to this wine. Really matched beautifully. Okay, we're at beef tenderloin now, similar, of course, to filet mignon, but this time served atop onions that have been reduced in an entire bottle of Petite Sirah. Really fabulous pairing. The big, bold wine and the richness of the beef complements the jammy fruit, and the concentrated wine reduction gives the sweetness to the onions. It's really unusual and really beautiful together. And with this dish, both being this lush wine and the lush dish, an 08 Fopiano Vineyards estate, Russian River Valley Petite. Very, very nice. The jamminess in that wine really complemented the richness of the beef. Okay, how about game? I think gamey flavors really are another good accompaniment to Petite Sirah. And I recently had a roasted venison with a blackberry compote. This was incredibly zesty, and with the supple Petite Sirah was really just showcased the savory game aromas of the wine. And using the blackberries as an accompaniment really tied in the blackberry fruit in the wine. So it was very, very beautifully married together. For this dish, I had a 2008 Miro Cellars Rock Pile Petite Sirah, another beautiful match. Okay, so let's talk about how you can gain some creaminess in a Petite Sirah. And I think a beef stroganoff really fits the bill. With the sour cream in the sauce of a beef stroganoff, it really accentuates some creamy qualities that you can get in many of the Petite Sirahs that I've tasted out there today. I like how the mushrooms, too, in the dish really kind of highlight an earthy quality about Petite Sirah. So, you know, like many wines, there are different styles of Petite Sirah. I think they all have a place at the table. And with this, I paired a Rockwall 2009 Carver Sutro. Really fabulous match. Okay, should we talk about fish a little? How many of you have traveled to France and had wine and cuisine in France at some point in your life? I'm sure many have. And the French love pairing big red wines with seafood. And I do too. And one that I think really marries well with Petite Sirah is a blackened salmon. The char on the salmon really accentuates kind of a toasty quality in the wine. It's plenty big enough because you really have a lot of weight there in this dish with the blackened preparation. And so Petite Sirah definitely does not overwhelm the dish. It nicely complements what you've got in front of you. And I paired this with a fruity Michael David Petite, which is 85% Petite Sirah, 15% Petite Verdot. Really the fruitiness of this wine really stood up to the heat of the blackened salmon. We might have a few vegetarians in the room. I know my son's a vegetarian, so we often have to think about vegetarian dishes at our house. And an eggplant parmigiana really goes nicely with a variety of different styles of Petite Sirah. The plummy fruit and the spice with the eggplant dish is really beautiful, and it stands up to the fullness of the sauce. Sometimes you might think there is a clash with any kind of a red sauce, but you have the creamy mozzarella in this dish, which really ties it together. So you find the tomato sauce does not really clash when you're pairing with Petite, when you've got this added fat from the richness in the cheese. And a 2008 Bogle Vineyards, very fruity, easy to quaff Petite Sirah really matched this well. Okay, so let's talk about a few cheeses, because I think that cheese and petite really are terrific together as a dessert course. And a lot of people talk about petite Syrah with chocolate. That's fine. As I say, it's your palate and you need to please your palate. That's rule number one. For me, the wine has to be at least as sweet as the dessert. So for me, I like the dessert course of cheese with a petite Syrah. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of cheeses I've had recently that go very nicely with this wine. One is a Danish blue cheese. There's a tangy, ripe characteristic to a Danish blue, and I think this cheese really pairs well with a lot of different petite styles. I like the salty note that offsets the fruit, and the weight of the cheese and the wine are nice together. And with this, I had a 2008 Pedroncelli. It was a Dry Creek Valley Petite Syrah. Very nicely done. And the peppery quality, occasionally, not always, but occasionally a Danish blue will have a peppery quality. And this wine did have pepper, and it really accented the marriage of the pepper in each the wine and the dish and the cheese. Okay, what about a Swiss Gruyere? This flavorful cheese has salt and sweetness to it. So again, I think this can pair with a lot of different styles of this beautiful grape. And I think when the cheese is young and creamy, it's got more of a nutty quality, and that matches with a nice bit of petite that's got some spice to it. And when aged, you have a more earthy quality. And so with an aged Swiss, I think it goes nicely with a petite that's got a little earthy side to it, which I find very, very complementary to the fruit. With this wine, I enjoyed a 2007 Bray Vineyards, Shenandoah Valley Petite Syrah. How about a Gorgonzola? Now this can be either a cow's milk or goat's milk Gorgonzola, and this is quite creamy in its youth as well. So you really want something to pop flavors in your mouth, and I think you need a really densely fruited Petite Syrah. And when this cheese is aged, it becomes more pungent. So, you can really marry this with different styles of petite depending on the age of the cheese. What went well with this was the 05 Concannon Reserve Petite Syrah. Really a nice pairing with the Gorgonzola. And this was a cow's milk Gorgonzola I had, and it was really nice and juicy and brought out the fruit in the wine. Okay, aged cheddar, rich and robust. Aren't those two great words to describe Petite Syrah? Absolutely. I enjoyed a Fiscalini Farms bandage wrapped cheddar, which is really a gorgeous cheese, and comes from here in California in Modesto. And it's got a classic sharp cheddar taste, but it doesn't have the bite to go along with it. And I paired this with an 07 McKay Petite Syrah from Lodi. Very handsome pairing. And lastly, an aged Gouda. And interestingly, I was in Des Moines, Iowa, judging a wine competition 2 weeks ago, and headed out to the Frisian Farms cheese producer, and we took a tour of the farm and had cheese made right there, right then. And they were describing to me that we pronounce this cheese wrong. It's really Gouda. That's the proper pronunciation. If you're in Holland, it's Gouda. But of course...
Excuse me, doesn't she appear on the Today Show?
Ah, very well could be.
Gouda, sorry.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry.
I love your sense of humor. And everyone's awake. And Kathy Lee, there you go. Okay, so I think a dense black fruit dominant Petite Syrah goes really nicely with an aged Gouda. It'll take me time to get used to the real pronunciation. And a big wine will bring out the depth and the spice that you find in this Gouda. And they actually also, at this particular farm, join spices into their Gouda, so you can taste different styles of this cheese. And I found them to be a really perfect pairing with Petite Syrah. I brought a bottle of Petite Syrah to the judging. As dinners afterwards, we often bring wines to competitions, as Dan well knows, and everyone was really blown away with this beautifully rich, rich wine. It's just a stunning grape, it really is. So with the aged Gouda, I paired it with an 09 Trent de Douai Petite Syrah, and again, the depth of this wine and the depth of flavors in the cheese just really, really complemented one another. So that was terrific. Okay, so I think it's really important, just to think about what suits your palate. Again, it's your palate, and nobody can say you're doing it wrong. And yet, remember that the body and the weight of the wine should generally follow the body and the weight of the dish. So a couple of examples for my palate that don't work are, think Petite Syrah with a very delicate soul. The Petite really dominates, and you don't really even taste that soul because it's so delicate in flavor. And just like I would not pair a very delicate Pinot Grigio with a hearty beef stew. The stew's just going to take over and the wine's going to get lost. So I think if you follow that, the weight and the body of the wine with the weight and the body of the food, there's a lot you can do with great wines and beautiful cuisine. And I think as years ago when I was a sommelier at the Ritz-Carlton, I would often recommend when a table would say, well, I'm having duck, what do you think? How about Petite Syrah? I've just been a huge big fan carrying the Petite Syrah banner. It's such an incredible grape. It is so beautifully fruity, spicy, and has so many components that make a beautiful meal even better. And so let's raise our glasses and say, here's to all of you, here's to Petite Syrah, and Joe, Jose, and all of the Concannons. Thank you for a beautiful event.